All right, take 12. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. My name is Stephanie, and for this assignment, I chose the book To Sleep with the Angels by David Cowan. It's a graphically detailed depiction of one of the worst school fires in the history of forever. So essentially, on December 1st, 1958, a two-story Catholic elementary school in the west side of Chicago caught fire and killed 92 students and 3 nuns within a 15-minute period. The effects of this disaster led to a monumental overhaul of fire safety standards for every school across the country. But despite the gruesome account Cowan portrays in this book, this is a fantastic read. It was well written using first-hand interviews with the survivors, and you're able to understand the tragedy from every perspective imaginable. Children, the parents, the bystanders, firefighters, everyone. I highly recommend this book. Alright, so let's get into it. The school was located on the corner of Avers and Iowa Street in West Chicago within the Austin District, a predominantly Italian and Irish community in Chicago. Many of the families were blue-collar workers, small business owners, and there was, and still is, they are heavily baptized in Catholicism, so they're very Catholic. Today, Galapagos Elementary Charter is located on the site of the incident. The school itself served grades kindergarten through 8th grade, with many of the classrooms packing over 50 students. The second floor, which saw the most damage, held grades 4 through 8. The building was built in the early 1900s, and its most recent renovation was seen in the late 40s. The exterior was made of brick, and the interior was made predominantly of wood and plaster. Many people after and even before the fire described the building as a fire trap. This is a rough illustration of the building that I found on a website memorializing the event, just to give you a better, understanding. The building was in a U shape, and this was one wing, the north wing, that saw the brunt of the destruction. To the left, you can see the only fire escape the building was equipped with, and on either side of the wing is a stairwell. However, these stairwells were not enclosed, as I will explain later, and this is one of the main reasons the fire spread. Alright, so I'm going to try to attempt to give you a sequence of events quickly, as best as I can. So somewhere around 2:10, 50 minutes before the end of the day bell, a fire was started in the basement as indicated by the arrow. The fire smoldered for about 15 to 20 minutes undetected, allowing it to grow in size and intensity. Sometime before 2:30, the time can't really be determined, it's like chaos. The school's janitor, who was also the father of 3 students, noticed the smoke coming from the school on his way back onto campus and sees the fire from the boiler room. Raymond sees 2 kids emptying trash cans and tells them to leave and call the fire department. He runs to the front office and tells the nun behind the desk to call the fire department as well. As Raymond discovers the fire and tries to begin warning the school, students and teachers, especially on the second floor, begin to smell the smoke, sparking the beginning of 30 minutes worth of chaos. Not long after the students and teachers notice the smell of smoke themselves, the school ignites at enormous speeds. However, no alarms had been sounded, and the nuns were hesitant to evacuate their students without the official go-ahead. When classrooms finally realized they were in deep trouble, often too late to escape, many of the nuns instructed the students to pray. The fire climbs up the northern stairwell and makes its way down the hall where the majority of the damage is realized. Rooms 210, 211, and 212 were hit the worst. Finally, at 2:42 p.m., the Chicago Fire Department receives an alarm about the fire. They arrive on scene within 2 minutes, however, they were given the wrong address by a bystander and were sent to the Iowa Street side of the building as opposed to Avers around the corner. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late. Every room on the second floor was already covered in thick black smoke, and the walls and ceilings were completely on fire. Children were seen jumping from the second-story windows, one after another, sometimes 3 at a time. Some were lucky enough to break an ankle or 2, others shattered hips and spines. Before the fire department arrived, bystanders, many of which were parents of the students, attempted to help by bringing their own ladders, but unfortunately many were too short, and the parents were seeing their children literally being lit on fire and able to do nothing about it. The roof eventually collapsed near the fire escape, with many students still caught inside. Parents and bystanders looked on in horror, as you can see. On the day of the fire, there were 1,600 students inside. The vast majority, especially those on the first floor, made it out fine. The fire department rescued 160 students, however, 92 were not so lucky. This is a photo of the firefighters recovering the body of an unidentified girl. And this is probably the most famous photograph of the incident, taken by Steve Lasker of the Chicago American newspaper. It shows firefighter Richard Scheit carrying the body of a 10-year-old John Jakowski out of the building. Alright, so what went wrong? Simply put, a lot. First, the classrooms were grossly overcrowded, many by 10 to 15 students. Second, the building materials were extremely flammable. The foundation wood inside enabled the fire to grow and kindle at an alarming rate. Third, and argued by many to be the most important, the building stairwells were not enclosed. This is important because open stairwells allow the fire to travel. If they were closed, specifically with the heavy fire doors that are seen in all schools today, the fire would likely have been stopped in its tracks. Instead, the stairwells acted as chimneys. Next, the building had no built-in sprinkler system. That kind of measure would have suppressed the fire considerably. Fifth, the building was equipped with only one fire escape, as I mentioned before. Unfortunately, only one classroom was able to use it. It was also on the same side of the building the fire was. Sixth, the school had certain protocols for dealing with alarms and evacuations. The school can only evacuate after an alarm is sounded, and the alarm can only be sounded by the principal, who was unfortunately substituting for another teacher that day and wasn't even in her office. Eventually, a rogue nun flipped the alarm herself. However, seventh, the alarm only rang within the building, not outside, therefore was not connected to the fire department, and they were delayed in hearing about the fire. Lastly, there were actually fire codes in 1958. However, they were written and implemented in 1949 and not retroactive. This means that only buildings constructed after 1949 had to comply. Since the Our Lady of the Angels building was built in the early 1900s, it only had to abide by rules laid during that time. So my 4 sources. Cowan's book, To Sleep with the Angels, is a wonderfully written tale about what happened that fateful day. However, this book is dedicated to the survivors and responders of the incident and offers very little insight on the effects that were realized as a result. And there were many changes. However, truth be told, many of these sources actually cited Cowan's book. For my first source listed, Thomas Cunningham of the With the Command website states that improvements were made upon things such as fire alarm street boxes having to be closer to schools, and the state of Illinois General Assembly passed life safety codes that dramatically changed how buildings were constructed and maintained. That's probably the biggest thing that happened. My second source, by Jeffrey Zokol, who is a writer with Eastern Illinois University, discussed how the LA Fire Department conducted a recreation test in 1959 called Operation School Burning that detailed possible causes for the fire and produced a laundry list of improvement suggestions. He also describes how virtually overnight after the incident, public schools across the country did thorough inspections of their own schools, and many cities closed some of their schools as a result when they found a lot of safety violations and fire violations. The Chicago Sun-Times recently read an article about the fire, taking a retrospective look at the incident. They detail how the building and safety codes changed throughout the U.S., pretty much what I just talked about, they just reiterated. And lastly, Source 4 is thrown in there not because it depicts changes, but it is a beautiful memorial to those affected by the disaster. Though a really poorly constructed website, it offers personal stories, photographs, diagrams, news stories, everything imaginable related to the disaster. I recommend checking it out if you have any interest. It's olafire.com. And there we go. Oh, crap. And that'll do it for me. I look forward to your questions, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. I'm assuming I went way over time. But anyway, thank you. Have a great day. Stop recording.